Chapter 7. Everyone stood in silence, staring at Alison's head in horror. "Do you still think I'm being silly?" Her lip trembling, Alison confronted the cluster of girls who stood outside her door, gaping at her. "Well, do you?" "No," Bess gasped. "What's the problem here?" Monique Durand's distinctive voice came up behind them. "Alison's makeover," Bess managed to murmur. "Her hair." "Ah!" Monica let out a little scream when she saw Alison, who had tears spilling down her cheeks now. "You poor, poor girl!" Monique cried, lifting a clump of what remained on Alison's head. "Come inside the room. We must talk." Gently shooing the others away, Monique put an arm around Alison's shoulder and guided her back into her room. "When I was a young model in Paris, I had a similar experience," Nancy heard her telling Alison before she shut the door. "The bus is downstairs waiting to take you to Anderson Park," one of Bettina's young assistants, a girl named Jackie, called up and down the hall. "Let's go, everybody!" "Coming with us, Nan?" Bess asked, lightly touching her friend on the arm. "I'll meet you there, Bess," Nancy said, walking to the elevator with her. Heather Richards poked her head out of her door just then. "Wait for me," she called to the girls. Heather's lustrous ash-blonde hair was fastened back on one side with a comb, giving her an ultra-sophisticated look that really worked. Even though Heather hadn't needed a makeover, the one she had gotten really suited her. "We'll hold the door for you," Carrie Harper told Heather. Nancy could tell that Carrie was used to being nice. "No problem with Heather's makeover, I notice," Kelly whispered to Nancy as the beautiful ash blonde sauntered past them into the elevator. "I think I should have a little talk with a hairdresser," said Nancy as she stepped into the elevator. "Good idea," Kelly said quietly. Pierre LaFortune had a wild perm himself. His hair, though thinning on top, flowed out in small blonde ringlets behind his ears. "I was sick, absolutely sick when I saw what happened to that sweet, sweet girl," he was telling Nancy. It was half an hour later. She'd gotten his address from Milan and gone to the salon where the girls had had their makeovers. "But I tell you, it wasn't my fault." "I don't know how many people are going to agree with you about that, Mr. LaFortune," Nancy said as gently as she could. Flopping down in a pink vinyl revolving chair, the hairdresser let out a howl. "I know! My reputation will be ruined. I only pray that this doesn't get into the papers. But if it does, I'll show them the materials I used. I put the same chemicals on that girl's hair that I've been using for years." "Do you have the empty bottles?" Nancy asked. Pierre got up from his chair and pointed to the side of the room, where several pink enamel hair washing tubs stood. "If they haven't been thrown away, they should be right over there." Shaking his head, Pierre walked with Nancy over to the wash tubs. "Did you see the other girls I did? They looked lovely. Heather, Carrie, Natasha." He shuddered at the memory of Alison Williams. "These are the empty containers. You see, they are all exactly alike, like all the other containers we use here at Mr. Pierre's." Uncapping one of the pink plastic containers, Nancy took a whiff of finishing solution. The second container smelled the same, but the third was distinctly different. "Ugh," she said, handing the container to Pierre. "Smell this." "I thought something was wrong with the container, so I double-checked the date on it. See, it's fresh." Pierre pointed to the top of the container. According to the date, the product could be used safely for several months. Nancy sniffed the container again. Memories of her high school chem lab came to mind. This isn't a hair finishing solution. It's some sort of caustic chemical. The hairdresser's eyes bulged wide. But who would put caustic chemicals in my supplies? Nancy gazed steadily at the hairdresser. That's what I intend to find out. Who exactly was in the salon this morning? Only myself, my assistant, and the people from Face of the Year, he told her. They had exclusive use of my shop for the day. May I keep this container? Nancy asked, holding up the bottle with the offending solution. Please, Mr. Pierre lamented. Get it out of here. I never want to see it again. The shoot was in progress by the time Nancy arrived at the Anderson Park exercise trail. Nancy's cab pulled up at the first exercise station just as Trudy Wu was making a turn over the parallel bars. Trudy must have had many gymnastic classes, Nancy thought, approaching the group. The girl was able to flash an easy smile in the direction of the camera, even as her body twisted upside down. Off to the side, the other contestants stood waiting their turns. Most of the other girls had slipped on coats over their leotards and leg warmers. Anderson Park had one of the best outdoor exercise facilities Nancy had ever seen. The aim of the shoot was to show each girl on a different piece of equipment. Since it had rained the night before, the ground beneath most of the equipment was muddy, even though the track itself was dry. Now let's have Heather Richards on the rings, the photographer said. She's in the trailer. She's having trouble with a contact lens, Bettina told the photographer. Use someone else. Any volunteers? The photographer asked. Bess was giggling as she raised her hand and waved it. Okay, he pointed at Bess. You're on. Bess stepped forward and walked toward the rings, but stopped short of them. It's really muddy under here, she said, staring at the ground. The lighting man was at her side in a flash. I'll hoist you up so you don't get dirty. He lifted her up with a grunt, and Bess grabbed the rings. This is hard, she announced. But it looks good, the photographer said, rushing around the other side of the bar to get a different angle. Okay, let's have a smile. Bess managed a smile, though Nancy could tell she was struggling madly to stay on the rings. Bess wasn't noted for her athletic abilities. Her idea of a hard workout was to give herself a manicure. Now let's see you pull yourself up. Bend your elbows and let's have another smile. I can't, Bess said, gritting her teeth. I just can't. The photographer's response was a smile. That's nice, very nice. I want some sweat shots too. Ugh, Bess said, still struggling. Her look of struggle quickly changed to one of panic when one of the rings suddenly snapped. Unable to hold herself up with one hand, Bess plunged into the mud, face first. Oh no, Nancy cried, rushing to her friend. Are you okay? Am I okay? Do I look okay? Huge globs of thick brown mud streaked down Bess's face, and her outfit was totally ruined. I meant, did you break any bones? Nancy said pointedly. No, Bess moaned, but my hair, my face. As Bess's fellow contestants comforted her, Nancy searched the ground under the rings. Sticking up out of the mud was a bolt, or rather half a bolt. It had been cut almost all the way through. When Bess hung on it, her weight snapped it in two. As soon as Bettina looked at Bess, she made a face. Bad luck, she said, without a lot of mercy. Sorry, darling, you're out of this shoot. You might as well get back to the hotel and shower. But Bettina, Bess protested, I could wash up somewhere. Here, pig, here, piggy, piggy, Heather muttered. When the other girls stared at her, she only shrugged. Lighten up, guys. I was only making a little joke. Nancy noticed that Bess's hands were clenched into tight fists. Come on, Bess. You'll look fine by tonight for the banquet. Ugh! I could spit, Bess said as soon as the others were out of earshot. It could have been a lot worse, Bess, Nancy said, leading her friend out of the park to a cab stand. At least you didn't break any bones. Oh, that's great, Bess said sarcastically. Nancy was quiet during the ride home. Until Bess simmered down, she decided the best thing she could do was to remain neutral. By the time they reached the hotel, Bess's mood did seem to have brightened a little. Oh well, she muttered. They say mud is good for the skin. Nancy smiled and put an arm on her friend's shoulder. That's the spirit, she said, as they made their way to the elevator. You know something, Nancy? I'd like to eat a pastry the size of the Wrigley building. Maybe that would make me feel better, Bess muttered as they got off the elevator and walked past Heather Richards' room to their suite. You know, Nan, why doesn't Heather get dumped in the mud or anything? She's just been lucky, said Nancy. Nothing terrible has happened to Carrie Harper, Diana Amsterdam, Trudy Wu, or Natasha either. Know what I think? Bess said bitterly, standing at the door of their room while Nancy unlocked it. I think Heather Richards is jinxing this contest. Nancy thought it was time to change the subject. Isn't it great to have somebody else pick up? She said when they stepped into the bedroom. It sure is, Bess agreed. Well, I'm heading straight for the shower. Okay, Nancy said, flopping down on the bed. Her mind was whirling from the events of the day. Staring up at the ceiling, she found herself wondering about Roger Harlan. If Roger was behind the cut railing, he must also be the culprit behind the other incidents. Alison's hair disaster, Bess's dive into the mud. But how had he done it? As far as Nancy could tell, Roger had been nowhere near Pierre's salon or Anderson Park. Bess was out of the shower and freshly dressed by 5. I'm positively famished, and the banquet doesn't start for 3 hours, she said. Want to come with me to the coffee shop? I've got to eat something. Sure, Nancy said, stretching and getting up. They left the room and went into the hall. Watch out, a voice called from behind a clothing rack moving up the hall. Nancy, Bess said as the rack rolled by her. I bet those are the dresses we're wearing tonight. Don't you wish you could get a peek at them? Pulling Nancy by the arm, Bess took off after the rolling rack. Hi, she said to the curly-haired boy pushing it. Are those dresses from Smash? 8 Smash formals, he answered with a grin. They go to suite 444. That's them, Bess told Nancy as she hurried along after him. Wait, she called to the boy. Would you mind if we took a look at them? We won't be long. The smile she gave the delivery boy was irresistible. Nancy wasn't surprised when he stopped pushing the rack. Sure, he said, dazzled by her. I'm early anyway. That's so sweet of you, Bess purred. She walked over to the rack and inspected the dress on one of the hangers. Here's mine! Bess lifted a filmy sky blue dress off the rack and held it out for Nancy to see. Like the others, the dress was covered in plastic that was easy to see through. Bess's dress was absolutely gorgeous. The neckline was low and wide, the waist and hips fitted, and at the knee the skirt flared out in flouncy ruffles. "I adore it," Bess said, taking the dress off the hanger and pretending to waltz. "Are you girls in the contest?" the delivery boy asked. Bess nodded modestly. "I am," she said. Nancy flipped over a small tag around one of the hangers and pulled out a soft peach creation. "This one is Maggie's," she said, admiring the lovely silk dress. "Oh!" Bess cried. "It'll be fantastic on her." Putting Maggie's formal back, Nancy held out a creamy satin dress with rhinestones dancing over the neck and shoulders. "Check this one out," she said with a wry grin. "It's for Heather Richards." "Ugh," snorted Bess. "It'll look great on her, too." "Here's Natasha's," Nancy said, reaching for a forest green velvet gown. "Are those ruffles on the front?" Bess asked. "I don't know," Nancy answered, lifting up the plastic to check it out. The answer was all too clear as soon as the cover was off the gown. The material was hanging in long, jagged shreds. Natasha's designer creation had been slashed to pieces. End of chapter 7.